Hello, thank you for coming and or coming back. I want to hope that all are well and safe this Saturday. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to YouTube channel. I have to hold these up. And the YouTube in addition to will be edited in steps following along, and you can use it as a paint along at home in your own studio, which is really kind of nice. And you can go to Towering Winds Academy of Arts at teachable.com, at dalepopovich.com. I also have an online school, and my weekly classes that I'm usually teaching until this quarantine, I teach at the Elmhurst Art Museum on Tuesdays. I teach at Main Street up in Lake Zurich on Wednesdays. And I teach at the Palette and Chisel down in Chicago. I co-teach a course called Fundamentals, Drawing, Design, and Painting. I co-teach it with Bob Krajewski, who's a wonderful teacher. He teaches on Tuesdays and I teach on Thursdays. I also have a watercolor class on Thursday afternoons from 1:30 to 4 o'clock. So I'm also having workshops this year. A couple have been canceled already, which we'll have rescheduled of those, but I'll be teaching at Lake Zurich at the end of May. I'll be teaching up in northern Wisconsin. I don't have a workshop date up there yet. And I'm also teaching at Dillman's at the end of September and the beginning of October during the Fall Fest. You can come join me, especially up in Wisconsin. It's a wonderful place.
And McCord.
And I'm also having a one-man show at McCord eventually. We haven't got an actual date on that yet confirmed because of what we're going through now. And I'm also doing a 3-day workshop at the end of October at the McCord Gallery in Palos Park. That will be posted also.
You can check his website, dalepopovich.com, for all that information. And before you say any more, I just want to let you know that Becky Kraft said hi.
Hello.
Wendy said hello. So excited. Wrote notes to myself so she didn't forget since I'm losing track of the days. Laugh out loud. Boy, isn't that true. Suzanne's watching. Linda is watching. And Judy is watching.
Judy who?
Judy Schneider.
Oh yes. Okay. Iverson.
Okay. And Brad Field is watching.
Hello, Brad. Anyways, I'm here with my wife. She is the brains of this operation where I'm just the brush. And also our new little one, Poppy, who's sleeping underneath my chair right now. Doing a fall scene from northern Wisconsin or Upper Peninsula. I travel a lot of different roads up there, and there's many times I get lost. So I'm going to name out the colors that I'm using. This is the scene that we're doing.
Up a little higher.
Okay, and I've modified the scene a little bit.
Ann Lone says hello.
Hello. I've added a couple of trees over here, if you can see, some larger trees to anchor this side over here. There's a lot of little trees going on over here on this side that will be minimized, and I'm going to add a little bit more color than what's here because I always believe in adding and subtracting things. I'm always telling the students, don't become attached to your photograph. It's not a marriage. You want to do some embellishments. You want to change the composition a little bit. You want to do a number of things to help make the composition better. But these are the colors I'm using. I'm using madder or brown madder, and this is a Prismacolor tube, as you can see here. And I'm using 3 core paints. I'm using a variety today. I'm using their sap green. I've become enthralled with cores lately. And I'm using Mars Orange Deep, which is my substitute for burnt sienna in this particular case. I'm using Cobalt Blue by Core. I'm using the Cadmium Yellow Deep by Prismacolor. It's a nice color. And I'm also using Holbein Naples Yellow, and it's a little bit cooler yellow for things in the background. So, why don't we get started?
And also Lisa from Lakeland Art League is on.
Hi, Lisa. How
And-
you doing?
Liz Hazen
Hello.
Wilburn, I'm sorry, is from Nebraska.
Nebraska.
Yeah.
How's the weather out there? Anyways, I'm going to wet the surface ever so slightly with a slight spray. And I'm going to begin by painting, starting from the background, coming forward. I'm painting large to small. I like to include, in this particular type of subject, everything I possibly can. And I'm going to start off with the Naples yellow and the cadmium orange. And I'm going to begin painting up in here. And I'm going to add a little bit of that Mars brown from Coors. And I want to spray this a little bit more. It needs to be a little bit wetter. And I allow these things to flow. Now, the madder brown is my replacement for alizarin crimson because, as I stated last week, alizarin crimson is a fugitive color. It does fade rather fast. So you can see when I add that, it's got a little bit of a nice glow in it. And then I'm going to go to the yellow light here quite a bit.
Can you scoot your paint tray up just a whisker? So get it in the picture like this. Oh, sorry.
And I'm going to add a little bit more of that Mars brown and some of the alizarin crimson and a little bit of the cobalt blue to gray it ever so slightly in this particular area. You can see that it does gray down quite a bit. And again, I'm going to spray the paper just a little bit so that we don't end up with any hard edges. And the idea is to keep all your edges soft as long as you can and do the defining of your subject matter within the second approach and third. Now I'm going to go to the sap green in the cores. And I'm going to take the ultramarine blue a little bit. I have ultramarine blue in cores also. Occasionally you will end up with drips here.
Lisa said it looks like you're doing good, Dale.
I hope so.
And she said she's doing well too.
Good. But I keep on working very fast. And this is the part that I feel is very important. If you don't get the right parts in the right place at the beginning in watercolor, you end up backtracking a little bit too much. So I got a little bit of the sap green, some of the cobalt blue in here. And as I come forward, I'm going to add a lot more of the yellow along the path here. I can always put in darker darks, but I got to make sure that my lights stay light enough. And I've done scenes like this before, but I've never done this particular scene at this point.
Carol Breyer's watching, and so is Patty Linden Silfrid. Sorry, not good with names.
And I'm going to take some of the cobalt blue with the sap green, and I'm going to put it in here a little bit because I want this a little bit more toned down. And I'm going to take the Mars brown here, and I'm going to try to create a gray to come down the road here a little bit more.
Don Skimmer just signed on.
Hi Don, how have you been? I'm going to take some of the yellow with the toothbrush. and I'm going to hit it right up in here. That's straight yellow.
And whose toothbrush is it?
That's my wife's toothbrush. I always clean it after I'm done. Always. Otherwise, at breakfast, she smiles with a strange color on her teeth.
Melanie Harris just signed on. She said, hello. She's from the Yukon in Canada. Now, if our cabin in upper Wisconsin still has 2 feet of snow, Melanie, how many feet of snow do you have in the Yukon?
Now, I'm going to take the sponge. It's a real sponge. I always have some sort of thing. And I'm going to do a little bit of lifting at this point. And it also gives me a texture that I can work with. And I'm going to pull out. I'll never get back to the white of the paper, which is, you don't want to go back to the white of the paper. But I want to make sure that I have some of my lights a little bit more modeled. As you can see that it starts coming out, and I'm going to lighten this up quite a bit. I have to wait, and as I'm always telling the students, timing is everything in watercolor. You have to wait till it sinks in a little bit more before you can do anything with it. And this is the shapes that I'm painting here. I'm looking at how things are forming the different shapes that I need that are in this photo. And I'm getting the basic imprint of the scene. And there's various ways that I do paint in watercolor. This is one way. Every week I'm going to try to show you something a little bit different, a little bit more variety.
I just want to mention that Cheryl signed in late and wants to know where she can get the source photo. Cheryl, after this is over, we're going to have a blog post. It'll have the pencil drawing, it's going to have the source photo, and what we want to do is show the 3 or 4 different phases of this painting. That'll be on his blog post. In addition, I'll re-edit it, and we're going to throw it up on YouTube, and the link will also be on his blog post. So if you would please go to dalepopovich.com. At the top of the homepage, there's a place where you can sign up for his newsletter, and then I send an email blast out when that blog post is ready. Also, Dale, I just want to let you know that Sylvia said it's much better just watching over your shoulder. And Carol wants to thank you for doing this live demo. He'll be right back. He's getting more water. So if you have any questions on anything about watercolor, please ask Dale. He loves questions, and he loves to talk and answer questions while he's painting. But no, he cannot chew gum and walk at the same time. Haha, just fooling.
Okay, while we have this little break at this point, because I need to let this dry and I needed to get some clean water and clean my palette. Around today, I usually don't do this.
Brad wants to know the paper.
The paper, thank you very much for reminding me. There's a lot of different things on our minds these days. The paper is a indigo paper, and it has a feeling of handmade. It's from India. You can get it through Cheap Joe's.
In what pound?
And it's 300 pound. Now, what I have to remind you is that they have listed at Cheap Joe's and other places. I used to get it at Dick Blick's, but it's cheaper at Cheap Joe's. They had, 320 grams listed, and you get 140 pound paper, which is fine. It's still a good paper, but I like 300 pounds. So you have to go to the 600 grams for the 300 pound. And I try to keep it 300 pound at all times. I did accidentally order 140 pound paper one time. There is a book I'd like to recommend. He's one of my first favorites in my childhood, even before I wanted to be an artist, is Winslow Homer. It's just his watercolors. It's a great book. I think it comes in paperback also, but it gives all his watercolors. Of course, they're not step by step because they didn't do that back in the 1870s and 80s and so forth. But he was one of my first favorite artists, even when I was a little kid. He did a lot of lithographs and ink drawings and so forth during the Civil War. But he has wonderful watercolors, and he is like the master of sticking things in the middle and making it work, where I'm always telling my students, try to avoid that. But it's a great book. You should have it in your library. And there's a lot of other wonderful watercolors out there. But try to look for Winslow Homer's watercolor book. Sargent also has one out. I'm going to take this over to the hair dryer. I usually don't use a hair dryer when I'm painting in the studio by myself. I usually watch it dry. And I'm looking at what I need to do. So I waited for the water to stop glistening to use the hair dryer. So give me a minute. I'll be right back with you. I'm using this particular color by Coors as my substitute for burnt sienna. Mars Orange Deep, which gives me that look that I want. The color I'm using for alizarin crimson is the Matter Brown Matter. It's by Prismacolor, but it sells in other brands too. One thing about colors and so forth, every artist has their colors they like to use. They also have their favorite brands. And I've tried a number of them, from Winsor Newton to Holbein to Coors to Prismacolor to Memory. You choose and pick different colors. And I'm the type of person that goes in, undoes the tube, and just like at the makeup store, rub a little bit on my hand like this to it so I can see the color. They don't like me doing that, but I want to know what I'm buying, because you'll never find what color it is by what they printed on the tube. So here we go, back again. And I'm going to go to a little bit smaller brush. I'm going to go back and forth at this particular part. And I'm going to take the orange and a little bit of the alizarin crimson. And I'm going to start by dry brushing in this. So I'm going to allow the pigment from underneath to show. And I'm always telling the students, every 3 or 4 brush strokes, 5 brush strokes, change your color or your temperature or your value. Even if it's a slight bit, I'm adding a little bit of cobalt to this. I don't overmix on the palette. So when I put things down, I have a variety of colors being put on the paper. And this is one of the things that is the charm about watercolor, is don't overmix your colors. As my wife says, don't become a Cuisinart or a mix master. So I'm allowing that color to show through, and then I'll go back and manipulate it a little bit here, a little bit there.
So Carol Van Arkel is on, and she said, "Hi, Marilee and Dale."
Hello.
She said, "Thank you for both once again for your contribution of keeping us all sane. This is a blessing."
Well, thank you. It actually helps us also look forward to something every week that we can do, for not only for you folks, but for us too. We need to keep our sanity and not chew on the carpet too long.
So Freddie also signed on. Freddie's one of Dale's Thursday night studio class students at our house. Freddie said when you get a chance, she would like to see that new watercolor of the sunset next to the hairdryer.
Okay. When I get a break here, I will bring it up here.
Dad from Lakeland is watching, and so is Ricardo from the Ileana Artists.
Hello, both of you. I hope everything's good with both of you. Stay healthy, safe. This tune shall pass. There's only so much rain in the cloud that it can hold.
You scared your doggy with the hairdryer.
I know. So I'm very carefully putting in these colors up on top and around, and I'm moving around the painting. I never ever stay in one area too long. I'm painting, looking at the comparison to what I need to put down as far as the masses go. And I'm looking at how things can be built up, because really, in essence, I teach how to build a painting, not how to paint a painting, because painting a painting can be a little bit different in its approach. And with our watercolor classes down in Chicago and so forth, I teach a little bit different method, but through a paint along, where I do the first section, they do the first section. And we continue until finished. Now, if something's too hard, I use the toothbrush to soften it a little bit. And that allows me to keep those edges soft as long as I possibly can keep them. But I always cross-mix colors that I have on my mixing tray. So I have my lights over here, my darks over here. So lights and midtones are all within one area. And you can start to see the painting take shape. And you can always go darker, so you don't want to force your darks too dark at the beginning, but I'm always putting down something for the light, something for the dark.
So Phyllis Kingsland said this is the best part of the weekend. Thank you, too.
You're welcome.
Karen Isaacson Wilson has hopped on board.
And so has Sue Spikert.
And Mary and Wiley said, great idea to share all your experiences. Thank you.
You're welcome. I love the hawk that you posted yesterday, by the way. Beautiful painting.
Sylvia said, nothing like Dale live, but this is great. And Brad Fields has a question regarding your brushes.
Yes.
He said they don't look like they're flat or round.
Oh, well, I introduced these brushes last week. These are, I got 3 cat tongue here. Large, medium, small. My wife ordered them for my birthday. You can get them at Amazon. They're on my supply list.
On his website.
On my website. And this is the brush I'll never give up here, this 1-inch ox hair. It was made by, the name fell off it by now, but I've had this brush for about 45 years. That one is something that I won't stop using. I did stop using my number 12 round by Winsor Newton when I got these brushes, because these brushes became quite a bit more versatile.
And they're under $20 for all three.
Yes, they're under $20, which, what a deal.
And real hair.
And it's real hair, real squirrel hair. So if you see any bald squirrels, thank them for their hair.
They're probably in China.
Yeah, they're probably in China.
Karen says, love this live.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to go in, and I occasionally clean my palette off when I get to certain points. I'm always changing my water, but I need to add a little bit of the cobalt blue back in here on the ground, and some cast shadows. You could start to see this taking shape. Now I got to come back into this area here, and I'm going to take the sap green and the cobalt blue, and I am going to make this a little bit darker so that it pushes that back and brings this out a little bit more. Our darks are always darker near us, and they get lighter as they go away. Now there's a little bit of ultramarine or cobalt blue on the end of my brush that went onto the paper. I find that to be kind of appealing, so I'm not going to do anything with it at this point. I will diffuse this a little bit. Now, I'm going to take the orange with the brown matter, and we have a little bit of the orange foliage down here. Now, one nice thing that you can do with this, I'm going to bring it down and around, and I've got a little bit over here. I like to move the color around so it's not isolated in any one place. Need a little bit more. This is a small tree that's in the foreground here. Catch this drip. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my smallest brush I ever use, which is a number 2. I have a lot of old brushes from my father, who was a photo engraver. This is an art sign brush. You can see it's been well used over the years. And I'm going to add a little bit more green with some earth color in here.
Agnes just signed on. She said,
Hello.
hey.
How are you today? And I'm going to go into the road. I'm going to let the rest of it dry. And orchestrating around and about in a watercolor, moving around, allows one area to dry and go into the other area. As I said, timing is everything, and I'm allowing things to dry in certain areas, but I want to get the road situated a little bit better. And I'm going to take a little bit of that color I have with the orange with the cobalt blue, and I'm going to run down the road here a little bit, give it that grayness, and then I'll show you what I'm going to do with it as I move through it. I'm going to take the toothbrush with the orange I put up in the top, and I'm going to go along the edge of the road here with those fallen leaves. And I'll worry about the cast shadows later. And it's here and there. I'm going to pull out lights on the road later, but I'm going to do this first. Now, with a brush, I can go in and manipulate a little bit here, a little bit there.
Agnes said it's all puddle management.
I like to tell my students it's like controlling a car crash. You get used to it after a while, but it's something that it took me almost 500 paintings in watercolor class with Irving Shapiro, my instructor. Wonderful instructor. But it took me quite a while to understand how to control the watercolor, or the water within the watercolor. I was chasing the watercolor around for months. And it's something that probably was the most frustrating thing I've ever done in painting, because I took oil painting for a year. I took illustration for a year, and I took a number of other things. Well, life drawing I took for 3 years while I was there under Bill Parks, who was a wonderful instructor. But I'm pulling out little things within the road here to define the light and the shadow, and I'll embellish the color later. But you can see things starting to appear. The trees are one of the last things I put in. I don't worry about the trees all that much.
So just let me know when you're done with step 2.
I am done with step 2 at this point.
Okay.
Now, the third step is the slowest step, and it is the longest entailed step. At the beginning, you work very fast. You're working with a lot of vim and vigor, and going in with confidence. Don't ever go in with a doubt. Think about what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, do a small rough that is proportionate to this. Don't ever go in and think, well, maybe it'll turn out, maybe it won't. With that in mind, it probably will never turn out. Now, there was somebody that wanted to see, I think it was Freddie, who's one of my current students. she also was in quarantine. She wanted to see a painting that I finished in my studio this last week. This is something that I did Wednesday. And it's of a sunset, which I don't normally do sunset. It had the bright sun almost in the middle of this. And there was a stream in the pasture or water from rain, and it was very dark. I did some embellishments, some moving things around, but I took the sun out itself. And what I did with this, I'm going to put this on the thing here for a minute, is that the foreground I had to make a lot more interesting because it was flat dark. And one of the things about darks is you want to make them semi-interesting. I don't know if you can see this the way it is here. This is probably a little better. But I used the same orange I'm using on this. I used cobalt blue, ultramarine. I used burnt sienna. And I used a little bit of cobalt violet in here. And I also pulled out some farm buildings way in the background. But this helps you lead the eye up and around. I don't have a focal point in this, which I'm always telling students focal points make a stronger composition. But you can get away with points of interest to slow the eye down, to have a place for the eye to rest. But this is what I was working with this week, and I played with the stream. The whole stream was illuminated, which I didn't want this yellow-orange stripe going through the composition, so I did tone this down, tone that down, allow it to illuminate here just off-center. But it was kind of a fun thing to do and also a challenge, but to get the foreground dark enough and textured enough, but not, it's a dark texture, it's not a light texture, because it would come forward way too fast.
And people say to Dale, I can't find good reference material. He found this while we were driving down up the expressway to our cabin in Wisconsin at sunset.
Marilee is my photo taker. I don't take my eyes off the road. I says, quick, look to the right, take that picture. So we're always armed with our iPhones.
So Agnes said beautiful, and Barbara Berry, appreciate this work.
Thank you. While this is drying, I'm going to go through a couple things here. This was handmade paper.
And you have to hold it up higher.
That I got from Vermont.
And flat against the board because it's in shadow. Now just a little lower.
There's my art director. And I was just playing with the colors. This was one pass. There was no going back into this watercolor paper because there was very little sizing in there, and it was spreading like, if you've ever worked on rice paper, it was spreading like wildfire. So it was something to control and be a little bit more difficult to use. But what's kind of fun, if you could see the back of this, there's pods and weeds and all sorts of things in it, which is kind of a cool thing. You just have to kind of try different things. I'm always trying different things.
Laura Cook Kittle said, this is great. Thank you for sharing. Suzanne said, beautiful. Hope you're feeling better, Suzanne. And Agnes said, extra challenging.
Now, right now, this looks like kind of a abstract mess that resembles the road. As I used last week, this was something I picked up at the dollar store. It's a foundation brush. I thought I would try it. What could it hurt? And I can pull out soft lights with this. It's very unlike the brush that I usually use. And one of the things I have to be careful of is this paper is very soft. Take note of that. The first time I demonstrated on it was here in my studio, and I went right through the paper because I was using an old oil painting brush, which is very, I don't know, stiff and a little bit more violent.
Well, aren't those oxhair? A stiff boar bristle kind of?
Yes, it is. So I was kind of not knowing what I was doing with it, but I thought, well, I'll try to demonstrate this for my class. And when the laughter died down, when I poked a hole in the paper, I told him, you don't want to do this.
Agnes, I don't think she was here when you introduced the paper, so you might want to...
This is an indigo paper. I'm going to put these shadows in later on, but I'm trying to manipulate the road. It's indigo paper. You can get it at Cheap Joe's.
300.
This is 300 pound, which is the paper that I prefer to use. And it's a very soft paper, so I'm handling it with kid gloves in this case.
Linda from Elmhurst said, "You two are a great team." Oh, you're so sweet, Linda.
It was Marilee's birthday yesterday. She's been legal to drink now for 2 years.
Agnes, we did a blog post on Dale's website, and we ran through all of the supplies used and information. In addition, I re-edited the video and put it on YouTube, so it's got the photo in it, so you can see that. It's got this painting. It's got all different kinds of goodies that you're not seeing here. And Agnes said that we're great. We're awesome. We're awesome, Dale.
You are.
You are too. You should have seen the beautiful painting he gave me for my birthday. I'll post that in the blog post too.
Every year I try to do a painting of something. In fact, I have it right here. Someplace. Here. This is what I painted her for her birthday.
Okay, turn it towards the camera a little more. There it is. Oh, look at
this. This is the road coming out of Jumbo Falls in the Upper Peninsula around Memorial Day about 6 years ago. So that's what I painted her. Okay.
Agnes, I'm writing Dale's website down. You'll see that in the notes in a minute.
And again, this will be posted on Facebook that you can use it as a paint along step by step.
No, it'll be YouTube it's posted.
Or YouTube, excuse me. I'll get it right one of these days. And I'm pulling out certain lights that I feel need to be pulled out in this particular case. I'll show you another way you can pull it out in a minute here. But I'm trying to keep things a little bit softer. I've got the image that I'm looking for at this particular point. I'm lightening parts of the road that I want real light. And I can always run cast shadows across them later. Now, the thing that I do occasionally is I'll spray the painting with a little bit of water. And I've made this sprayer spit. I put a needle in it so that it doesn't spray a mist. And I leave the water on there just for a short time. And I'll pull this off to get textures of the leaves. I don't put a lot on because I don't want it running down the board. But in darker areas, you'll see this is more evident. And I'm going to take this to the hairdryer for a moment. All right, I'm going to continue, assuming you're hearing me.
Dan just tuned in. Hi, Dan.
What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into some of my more extreme darks, modeling and shaping this in the back, and then along the side here to kind of frame this up in here. So I hope everybody can hear me.
I'm typing it in, yes. Sound is good for Karen.
All right.
Thanks for checking, Karen.
So I'm going to be dry brushing this in. At this point, and I'm going to be every so often changing the color or the temperature. I just added some cobalt blue to the sap green. It had the ultramarine blue in it before. And now I'm going to go into the background with more cobalt, because cobalt is my cooler blue I'm using. And there's a little bit of an opening back here. This kind of sweeps up into here. And I'm going to add a little bit of the brown to it. And trying to get the right shape in some of the places becomes a little bit more crucial. I'm going to take a little bit of the cobalt with that color in it, and I'm going to spray this in here. And then manipulate it up into here a little bit. So it starts to take a little bit better form at this point.
All right, Wendy wants you to define how you dry brush. And are you painting a little wet? And she also said thank you.
I'm mixing the color up with very little water, and then I take the brush and I'll tap it off on the paper towel. And then that gives me the dry brush effect. So I'll take it off like this, and I begin putting in. So on a highly textured paper, as the indigo is, it gives me the opportunity to glide across, hitting the high points of the paper and not the bottom points. And that gives me the color from what I previously painted to show up. Now I'm going to take a little bit more wet and I'm going to put that in here, because the dry brush ends up having sharper edges that are not desirable sometimes, and you can still soften them to a great degree. Now I'm going to take a little bit of the cobalt.
Barbara Vesper is watching. And
Hello, Barb.
She says she's been watching from the beginning, even though she had a little difficulty signing in. And Carol said thank you for sharing your great painting. You're a blessing for all of us. Carol, she was from your Tuesday afternoon studio class here at the house.
Back in the day. Okay, thank you for watching. So I'm toning down the back of the road at this point. Go ahead.
Suzanne wants to know if you ever paint flat.
Yes. I'm painting upright for the demonstration purposes. The watercolor that I showed before with the sunset, I started off wet the whole paper and it was flat. And I washed across the whole paper, blocking it in. I don't always work upright. I do work when it's necessary. I will work flat when I'm working wet on wet a lot. When I started this, I was working a little wet, but not a whole lot. You can see it's starting to take a little bit more shape at this point. And I want to go in and lift the end of this road out just a little bit. And this is my oil painting brush, just to make it turn. And I'm going to, you can see the oil painting brush really pulls up a lot, where that makeup foundation brush doesn't pull up quite a bit. It's really more a softening tool. But I want to get some of the light that is being invoked on this part of the watercolor. And I also want to use the green with a little bit of the yellow in here, touch of the blue, cobalt blue, and I want to begin putting in where the road actually is in here. I'm not worried about the cast shadows coming across the road at this point. I'll worry about that later. But this is the middle of the road where the cars don't ride and the grass grows. So it's starting to take a little bit more shape at this point. Okay, I'm going to address this up in here, but first, this area that is off to the left needs to be lightened quite a bit. And like I say, watercolor is not all that forgiving most of the time, especially when you're starting out. Watercolor is very frustrating. But what I did years ago is I took all my old paintings and I looked at them and said, well, this is no good, that's no good. And I began experimenting with them. So I learned how to fix a number of things. I'm going to pull out some individual leaves here and there. And I learned how to fix things. Or at certain points I ruined them beyond recognition, and I went in and said, okay, well, I learned something. Because you don't learn anything if you don't do anything, because the paint sitting in the tube is not going to learn you that much. You got to put it on the paper and make the mistakes and decide where things could improve. And right now I'm going in with some of the yellow. I want to intensify this area a little bit more, and down here a little bit more. And the toothbrush, I'm just flicking on there. If I pull it back, it will do a wider scope, but I'm very close and I'm very lightly putting the watercolor on. And I'm going to take a little bit of that yellow with the brown here, and I'm going to flick it into here. And that way I'm not touching the paper. Okay. One more pass up at the top, and I'm going to begin initiating the trees in here. But I need to make some more definite value changes. So I'm going to take a little bit of the Mars orange deep and the orange light, and I'm going to begin putting that in here. We still need a little bit darker, so I'm adding some cobalt blue to it.
So before you put the trees in, if you could stop, I'll take a photo of it.
Go ahead.
No. Are you putting the trees in now?
Not yet.
Okay, before you put the trees in.
All right. Then I'm going to take a little bit of the matter brown matter, and I'm going to add that in up here to get the darker leaves darker that are in the shadow here.
Valerie would like to see the photo again you're using when you have a chance. If you
See
could,
it all right?
yeah, pull a little closer to the camera. Yeah. All right.
Is that good, Valerie?
There's like a 7 or 10-second delay, so.
Okay. But a lot of this foliage will not make any sense at the beginning until the trees are put in. The trunks of the trees and the branches as we move through it. So I am adding a number of things in here. And I'm going to add a little bit of that light down in here. And a little bit more of the brown and the brown matter. I want to intensify the color in here a little bit more. Then we would have to leave this dry just a little bit. It shouldn't be too long. But I'm trying to make these patterns hold together, that they don't get too busy. I'll do is I will pull out some of the important light in between here with my 1-inch brush that comes down. So I'm looking at how things are developing. This is where you slow your painting process down quite a bit, because if you work too fast at this point, this is where you can ruin the painting. And believe me, I've ruined a few. I think we need a few birch in here, or lighter value. That's our youngest. I hope it's not Mary Lee.
It's your studio intern.
The what?
Your studio intern, the four-legged one.
The intern who eats anything that falls on the floor.
Don't pay her enough.
We feed her enough, that's for sure. And I'm entering certain darks in here that will make the watercolor a little bit stronger. Then when I do that, I can take this and manipulate the pigment a little bit. Now I'm going to leave that dry, so if you have any questions, you can go ahead and ask them, and Mary Lee will field them to me.
Kathy Manning, please show close-up of makeup brush.
Like I said, it was a dollar store. It was $1. I had picked these up. It's a foundation brush. Picked one up at the dollar store up in Eel River, Wisconsin.
But you can find it down
And
here
you can
too.
find them anywhere. And I was experimenting with it and playing with it in the log cabin up there. And it was 2 days before I had a workshop. This is very soft. And I went out back to the dollar store and bought a bunch of them for my students at the workshop in Minocqua. And I let them have them, and they've just been playing with them, I'm assuming, since then.
Okay, get a picture. And to see any other questions coming in that I missed? Nope.
All right. Couple of things here yet. I want to pull out a few trees back in here that are a little bit on the lighter side, just to show variants of some other trees, other types of trees, and start building the watercolor.
So you wet your brush and then you dry it?
Wet the brush. I pull all the moisture out with paper towel, and then I start lifting. And if you don't have a good brush for lifting, these synthetic flats are pretty good for lifting, or an old thin oil painting brush. But this is kind of a softer brush, and you can see on how it lifts out.
Freddie asked to see the reference photo when you have a chance.
You have to come to class, Freddie, to see the photo.
6 feet away from us, though.
Yeah. Here's the photo.
And you can pull it in closer.
Okay.
Okay.
Now I'm going to start putting in the trunks of the trees. And I am going to use the ultramarine blue and the madder brown madder, and a little bit of the Mars Deep Orange. And I can then start putting in some heavier trees here. And I'm going to allow them to flow in and out of the foliage. And this will begin to hold up the mass of leaves. I'm going to bring this a little bit closer here. I don't want to show all the whole branch. I want to allow it to go in and out. And not all the trees will be the same value or same color. Off on the other side, they're going to be a little bit warmer because they're in light. Here I made a little bit of cobalt blue to these. I'm going to bring this tree down just a little bit more to bring the size of it, relationship of the size, a little bit closer to us. And then off to the other side here in the shadow areas. So in allowing it to go in and out of the foliage gives you an idea of that they're in the woods and they are holding up that foliage. And I'm trying to be very careful about the separation of the trees, the size of the trees, so that you don't have them looking like they've been planted by a farmer. They're in perfect rows. Although there are some places in Wisconsin after forest fire, they are in perfect rows. And there'll be some other things that are done to this. But if you have any more questions, please ask. I hope the sound is still on.
Yeah, they said they're doing fine.
Okay.
Okay, Barberry, what number brush do you use for the trees?
I'm using these two cat tongue. And what's nice about it is that they're narrow and they're wide.
Do you want to put them up in the orange part of the painting?
Can you see those up here? You can paint very thin lines with them or broad lines with them. The bigger one I use for a lot of washes.
Becky Craft wants to know, do you sign in watercolor or gouache, or what do you use? Thanks.
I use watercolor. I don't go outside the medium. I've never signed one in pencil or ink or anything like that, no.
Never use Sharpie. I just heard
No.
about an artist that was using Sharpie, and the Sharpie fades over time.
Yep.
And what did you say about signing it in gouache if it's a transparent watercolor
Well,
show?
if you're in a transparent juried show, I'm adding a little bit of the orange here. If you're in a transparent juried show, it has to be, in other words, it has to be 100% transparent. You have to sign it transparently. There was a fellow down in Brown County that I have met years ago that signed his, it was a dark area kind of like this, and he wanted his signature light. And he signed it with a little bit of gouache in the signature, and the judge threw it out, which I thought was quite unfair. But some judges can be like that. Not all, very few probably. But that was wrong. Now I'm putting in some of these other things that that fall in here. That's a little bit too much. But it's when judging the show, you have to take into account first off what the rules are, and follow those rules extensively and try to judge them fairly with merit, of course. I am going to start defining the middle of this road just a little bit more.
So Cheryl, you wanted to know, first of all, she said amazing, can't wait to try. And she wants to know when the video will be uploaded. Last week I promised it would be Sunday, but by the time I finished editing it and writing the blog, it was published on Wednesday. So if you'll see on his Facebook page, it'll say that the blog is posted with a link. If you get on his mailing list, you'll get an email blast with a link to it. So I'm shooting for Wednesday. If it's any sooner, I'll let you guys know.
So I'm pulling out some lights that I feel that need to be a little bit more distinguished. I'm also going to take and add some greens into here a little bit more to tone this down. And I do want to pull out a few light areas back here where the light is hitting the road.
Oh, Cheryl, there's no pressure. I'm cooped up, just like everybody else.
Yeah, we found it's easier to train a dog to sit and stay than some humans, so it's kind of funny.
We got her to learn how to roll over left or roll over right this week.
Now I'm going to start with some of the smaller branches off of some of these trees here. Usually I take about 4 or 5 hours doing a large painting in my studio. And that is not total painting time. That's sitting, looking at it, adding a few brush strokes here and there. So I don't go into a lot of detail, but sometimes I do. Some paintings take a little bit longer, some less. The one I showed you of the sunset was about an hour and 15 minutes. Now, very quickly, I'm going to...
Hi, Jean Lake.
Hello. I believe she's from Wisconsin, Minocqua.
A North Woods girl.
Yes. So I'm adding some final embellishments here and there. I don't, when you're doing a demonstration, it's a teaching thing. It's not what you call a studio painting.
What size brush is that?
This is a number 1 round.
That's my eyeliner brush.
No, it's not.
Come on, Poppy. Come on down. Come on.
And I want to put some ruts down the road here very quickly, which will help lead the eye a little bit more.
Jean, since you just popped on board, this will be published on Facebook, so you'll be able to go to Dale's page to see it immediately. On top of that, we're going to edit it divide it into the 3 phases of painting. So if you wanted to use it as a paint along, and
I'm going to step back for a moment. I want to look at it from a distance.
really, he wants to go get our daughter. Let her into the upstairs.
I try never to paint a painting from start to finish with my nose on the paper. I always like ruts in roads. I've crossed small streams and so forth over the years with the car when we get lost. Okay, let's bring some of these down a little bit more, closer to the road in some cases. So it feels like the woods are encroaching. And I'm going to enhance this just a little bit more.
So would you consider this to be a study before you did a final studio painting?
Yeah, I use a lot of my demonstrations I even do in class as perhaps possible studies for a final painting. It's a good way to work out some of the problems that you might encounter in the final. So when you do a small study, I think that is a benefit to avoiding large mistakes. I'll show you an example in a minute here because I want this to dry a little bit. There's still a few more things I want to do. This was a demonstration I did in one of my classes, and it's of the same subject matter but not the same place. And this was my first impression of it with the students. I used all the same colors in all three of these. And then this was my second impression that I did. As you could see, the first up here, and this was my second. This is a little bit more moody, where the other one was a little bit more light and airy. The third impression is the final. You can see this. I've curved the road. I added a small figure back there, and I added quite a few more embellishments in here than what it was. So the first one was this, and the second one was that. So this is the final one is a combination of the first two. So again, it was a matter of weeding out what I wanted and putting in what I needed. And different configurations of the trees a little bit. But this is the thought process that I do go through. So this was the last one. This was the second one. And that was the third one.
Are they all on the same paper?
I mean, first, second, and third. These are on 140 pound. This one was on 300 pound. So I'm always looking at what can be done with it. So looking at this, there's a few things I still have to do. I hope you're still following along, but I want to pull out a few stronger lights in here on the road. Just here and there. And I have to be careful with this paper, with this brush. This is the one I went through. I don't need too many strong lights in this one because it will be a little bit too intense light back in here. I want it to be soft. So I'm going to add a few more trees back in here. I'm going to continue with these branches going in and out a little bit more across the road. And I'm very lightly putting in some of these here so that they don't become too defined. And I want to add a little bit more color in here with the yellow, and I think we'll call it. And this is a final embellishment. I need to do a little bit more up in here, but hang in there for a second. There's always something you could sit down and look at and see. So I'm going to take my smaller brush here with the orange and the yellow, and I'm going to add a few more embellishing leaves up in here, and then with a lighter value define this mass just a little bit more. Tone this down back here.
So it would be fun if you guys try this and then share your painting with Dale, and we can see everybody's painting is going to look different because you interpret it differently.
Yeah, it doesn't, is when I do workshops, I tell the students it doesn't have to be like mine, the photograph, like any other student. It has to be correct within its own frame of reference here. And that is so important. People get tied to the reference like that's the means to end all, and it's not. I'm adding just a few embellishments in here too with pure pigment. So I'm working a little bit thicker, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. But this is the time when I'm doing things like this, I can make mistakes and say, okay, I don't want it to look like that. I want it to look like this. Or I will leave that out completely. There's a lot of artists doing these demonstrations for their students and for the general public, and I think it's a good thing. We have a tendency of getting tied down with what's going on and thinking about it too much. We try not to watch too much of the news, but try to be somewhat informed at the same time, but we could get a little bit too depressed sometimes. So I'm adding a few leaves in here to add a little bit of character up front, and it's muted. And one thing that will happen is that this will dry a lot darker. It's not going to be as prevalent.
Patty wants to know if the painting is on half sheet.
It is on a quarter sheet. I divided the 22 by 30 into 4 things. And when I'm demonstrating, I don't paint on half sheets and so forth because you can get overly involved in your subject matter, and time doesn't always allow it anyway. So these final little touches I'm adding hopefully define the painting just a little bit more. And as many times as I demonstrate during the week when I'm teaching my classes, it could get quite expensive if I'm doing half sheets. Always have to look at cost on things too. Okay, almost there. Now what I'm going to do down here is I'm going to take a wet brush, very wet on the lower part here, and I'm going to wet this just with the brush very quickly, and it allows me to bring out or pull out by scraping away some of the pigment. Just a little bit. And I'm going to add a few darks up in front here to define the mass a little bit more. One of my problems as a student is I kept on running around the whole painting chasing the watercolor and ended up ruining most of it.
Barbara Berry said she loves the depth of this painting.
Thank you. Just remember, my darks back here are lighter than my darks up front. My lights up here are lighter than my lights back here. The lights get darker, the darks get lighter. So what happens is that they become closer together in value or in contrast. So you can't use the same value up front as you're using in the back. Things get cooler as they move back also. They're warmer as they come forward unless it's a white object. So I think what we'll do is we'll call it here in a second. I'm going to create a little bit more of a ridge here, just a little bit more, and I'm going to emphasize the cast shadows a little bit more. But just a few things here and there to define the road.
Cheryl said she likes the yellow accents. The sun is sneaking through the trees.
As it does all the time up there. One of the things about my workshop at the Dillman's workshop, or any of the other workshops up north in the fall, is that the fall colors are spectacular. I can't say it enough. They are. Last year was probably the most beautiful we've seen in 15 years. It was just absolutely perfect. And every year it's a little bit different. But it was dynamite last year. What I'm going to do in the foreground is I'm going to tone down. You'll watch the rest of the subject change a little bit. I'm toning down the foreground so that...
Oh, I missed one. Liz wanted to know, this was right after signing in gouache or watercolor. Liz
Yes.
said, do you sign, what color do you sign it? The
I
same
signed it a dark color of what I used in the painting. Other instructors or watercolorists or oil painters, whatever the case may be, will sign it in other different types of colors they may not have used. I know that some watercolorists sign it in black, as oil painters do, which I don't even have black anywhere within my reach in my studio because black doesn't exist in nature, so I don't use it. But there's other ways to use black, which is another lecture. There's one watercolorist that signs everything that he paints in a bright red orange, which is interesting because I find that sometimes it's very distracting because I'm seeing the bright red orange first and I'm not seeing the painting first. But me being right-handed, I usually sign it in the right-hand side. There's been on very few occasions I'll sign it on the left side, but in this case I would probably sign it over here, and I would probably sign it in something like ultramarine blue in the brown matter, something that's darker than what's here. But this is what we've done today. I want to thank you for watching very much.
Here, let me.
And remember, next Saturday at the same time,
There we go.
12 noon, Central Standard Time, we will be doing another demonstration. I haven't decided what we're going to do, but I will find something for us. So thank you again for watching, and my wife for manning the camera. That's her hand. And Poppy for winding through part of it.
And if private message Dale any subjects that you might want to consider. Remember, he's a landscape artist. But if there's something you're having a problem with, you can always ask him. And don't forget to sign up for his newsletter at his website. And Brad said thank you. And Linda from Elmhurst said thank you for a great class.
Thank you, everybody, for watching.
Bye-bye.